Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. I'm Rebecca Biblioteca. I'm joined with Bill Reel and Radio Free Mormon. It is Monday, August 17th, and we have some breaking news that we are going to go to right away before we hit our regular stories. This is something that occurred in mid-morning today. This is Monday the 17th, and the news just started to get out probably an hour or two ago is when I picked it up and started seeing the story. And the headline is "One Killed, Two Injured in Shooting at Kern's Funeral Service." And other headlines make it clear that this is at an LDS funeral. Now, when I first read that, I thought, is this some kind of, reposting of what happened 7 months ago in January of 2026 when there was another shooting at an LDS funeral where someone did die, 2 people died and 6 people were injured. So I'll just go through this really quickly. A funeral at an LDS meeting house in Kearns, Utah turned deadly Monday morning when gunfire erupted outside the church, leaving 1 man dead and 2 others critically injured. The shooting happened around 11:25 at an LDS meeting house. It gives the address here. Police officers were already at the funeral because authorities had received information beforehand that there could be problems at the service. And family members attending the service had tipped police off and said, we would like a presence there. So they were already anticipating there might be something that happened. And it looks like something did happen regardless of that police presence. The police found 1 man critically wounded on the roadway. He was transported to a hospital where he later died. 2 additional gunshot victims were also hospitalized in critical condition. As police responded, nearby schools were placed on lockdown, an elementary school, a junior high, and another elementary school as a precaution. And the authorities investigated the shooting and searched the surrounding areas where they found people trying to transport another victim. Car wouldn't stop. Police stopped the car. I mean, it was just chaos. Sounds like the other shooting back in January. The police say they believe this was an isolated incident. There was no ongoing threat to the public. Now, this is interesting. And they have not publicly identified a shooter. This is very different from the shooting back in January, where there was a manhunt. They said, we're looking for the shooter. We're investigating. The fact that they're not saying anything makes me perhaps believe that they may kind of know who did it, the circumstances, and they're just trying to gather evidence, to make it public. But they're at this point not announcing somebody in custody, and they are not saying that they're looking for anybody. So that's kind of a different scenario. I'm sure we will learn more. Here are some pictures from the location. You can see it is an LDS meeting house, huge police presence in the area. There they are. These are just a few pictures you can freeze on if you're interested in looking at more. But there is an interesting backstory to this. We did not report on this on the newscast because it didn't really have a Mormon component. But 10 days ago at a gas station in Riverton, a young man, I'll just read what it says here. Police say 23-year-old, and I'm going to butcher his name. Last name is Angelou, went into the Holiday Oil gas station near an address, attempted to buy alcohol. When the clerk said, you don't have ID, I can't sell it to you. There was an alleged altercation. The person went back outside, drove around a little bit, came back in toward the store with a shotgun, with a weapon. At that point, an armed civilian in the store fired, and this young man was killed. It was this young man's funeral that everybody was attending this morning where the gunfire erupted. So I don't believe anything about the circumstances of his death had anything to do with what happened at the funeral. I don't know. There's a lot of firearms and weapons and ongoing story. But my question for you guys is, what position does this put the LDS Church in? This has already gone national, and they're all referring back to what happened just 7 months ago. Another deadly shooting in an LDS building. What does the LDS Church do? Do they tell certain groups they can't have funerals? 2 Tongan wards meet in this building. I was able to look the address up right away and find that out, 2 Tongan wards. Or do they say nobody can have a funeral? Or do they ask their local leaders assess perhaps a threat risk at a funeral? That's very problematic. What do you guys think going forward? Because this is getting national attention and it's not positive.
RFM? Well, I don't know if you want to exclude certain groups of peoples from having funerals or using the building for a certain purpose as opposed to other groups of peoples who can.
Right.
Probably not the best idea. So what you do is you come up with a fictional group that doesn't have really anything to do with the real reason, and yet is big enough to encompass the problematic area, like in the Salt Lake City limits, perhaps, if that encompasses enough, or in the county itself, that we're not going to be using buildings to have any funerals anymore, and see if that takes care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to say as a church that we were not a church where you could pick which ward you went to, that you were assigned by geography. And this was a Tongan ward. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the last one a Tongan ward as well?
Yes. Yes, it was.
So on one hand, and again, I don't know what language barriers there are. I assume English speaking, but being sort of categorized by that ethnicity, maybe you have to go back to like, hey, here's the ward that lots of people meet at, and there happens to be some Tongan people here, and there's the ward down the street where some other Tongan people meet along with all the other folks in that geographic region, and the church gets away from having Tongan specified wards. Now, the issue might be if there's some language barrier. But the other thing I thought sort of humorous was, I think I now know where all the LDS growth is coming from. It's the gang members joining the church and showing up on Sundays. That might be how the church is getting its phenomenal growth that it's experiencing right now.
Yeah, I don't know what to think, but I do wonder, this was already high risk. Family members had already said, we need police here if we're going to hold this funeral. So it may be a scenario where local leaders evaluate, and if it seems to be too high risk, for example, I think I remember that one of the funerals of one of the people that died in the shooting in January at an LDS stake center, when they had that person's funeral, they outsourced it to, a funeral home or some other location. And I think I remember that the church covered the cost of that. That might be something too. I don't know, but it certainly is problematic. And I'm waiting to see, is the LDS Church even going to address this? I can't remember from back in January if they even put out any kind of statement, or if they just want to say, we're just not going to talk about it. So, yeah.
One thing I'll be interested in seeing going forward is how it is. I think the church is probably clear liability-wise in this case, because they saw there was a danger. They contacted law enforcement, and law enforcement showed up apparently, and yet not in such a way as to prevent any of this from happening. So I'll be interested.
Yeah, they were already there. Law enforcement was at the funeral. I believe it sounds like it might have happened outside, because they did find the victim in the road, and it sounds like it might have been something possibly outside. Again, breaking. We'll find out more tomorrow. But, 2 of these within 7 months with LDS funeral attached to the headline. The church is not liking this at all. So we'll keep you all informed. Let's move forward and find out what else we're going to talk about. There is other news. There always is. Bill is going to cover our top story, and that is prophets, seers, and portfolio managers. I love that title. I don't love the topic of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to cover happy 94th birthday, dear leader. It was President Oak's 94th birthday last week. Provo man sentenced in CSA case. That, of course, is RFM.
Why is it, of course, me?
What?
Why is that, of course, me?
Well, it just seems like anything with a legal element, you are the one to handle. Because if we try to handle the legal cases, we're always just deferring to you. What do you think, RFM? Can you explain? So we may as well just outsource the whole thing to you. That's how I think.
I think the audience has noticed this trend for a while now, that I get all of these stories. Go ahead.
If you don't want them, please pass them on. But we feel you do such an amazing job.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
Exactly. All right. Let the Christ-centered demolition begin. That's mine, about meetinghouses. Why won't these darn kids just up and get married? That's also mine, about a recent article that came out at BYU and marriage. LDS leader in Scotland sentenced on CSA case.
Whose is that?
Yeah, who could that be? I'll let the audience guess. Go ahead in the chat. Who's going to cover that? A record number of LDS missionaries topped out, and that's Bill. He loves the stats. He's great at crunching those for us. Tim Ballard's original organization gets $244 million from the feds. This is an incredible story that a lot of people have been sending to me going, what is happening here? And RFM is going to dig into this and explain. Ensign Peak's second quarter 2026 returns are out. And I believe that's I don't know if that's in addition to what Bill's covering at the top. I think it's the same thing. We're just saying it twice because it's so dang important. And then you can star in a church movie stay tuned. We're not making this up. This is something real. So let's move forward right away to Bill's top story on Ensign Peak. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, what's interesting here, of course, folks, if you go back, you'll remember the SEC scandal and the church having to pay, along with Ensign Peak, I think it was a $4 million fine. And what they had tried to do was hide all of the money from all of us and the general public at large. They did that by creating dummy companies, and they got busted, had to pay the fine, and had to have a statement, which I should have included here, but you guys have seen it a million times, where the church and the federal government agree to the facts of the case. And now we run into this moment where every quarter, the church now has to release the financials of, instead of those 13 dummy companies all hidden away, Ensign Peak as a whole, essentially, is an entirety. And so in this is the cover page for that 13F filing. You'll see that on the screen. And I'll just say here, what they made in the quarter that's being reported, again, this was quarter 3, 2025. Let me say this differently. Go back here for just a second. So this was the quarter ending 6/30/2026, and the church made in that quarter $7.146 billion. That's a lot. It's a lot. And I'll also say here, because we'll see this at the end, it actually isn't as much as they could have made if they had a really good team of investors running their portfolio. So again, this is a system that we believe, not we, but the folks who are in it believe are led by prophets, seers, and revelators. And so they reported their U.S. equity portfolio. And again, they have other portfolios in other countries. They have other investments and holdings outside of this. This is just a slice of the pie. And they reported a profit increase of $7.146 billion. That's 13.3% in one quarter. So they began by reporting at the end of the first quarter, they reported that they had $53.67 billion in the Ensign Peak Fund. That increased to $60.82 billion when they reported at June 30th of 2026. And that puts the disclosed portfolio essentially back near its quarter 3 high in 2025, where it was at $60.95 billion. If you'll remember, I think we talked about this, they experienced a loss in the market over the course of one quarter, and lost, again, somewhere around in the range of like $10 billion. But they're back to their all-time high, essentially. And what is important in this story is just how heavily now they're exposed to the AI ecosystem. And when you go through the report, it is tons of AI investments or one-off companies that are right at the center of AI infrastructure. And so NVIDIA, which I think all folks have heard of, but they're sort of right in the center building out this AI infrastructure. That alone, they've got $4.39 billion in NVIDIA. And that's the Ensign Peak's fund's largest holding at 7.2%. They've got Microsoft at $2.52 billion, Alphabet or Google at about $3.57 billion, Amazon at $2.13 billion, Micron, which is kind of the lead company heading up memory in the AI build out, at $1.31 billion, and AMD, who is another microchip builder similar to NVIDIA but smaller, at $823 million. And you can see that this very large share of the church's disclosed investment portfolio is tied directly or indirectly, again, Amazon, Alphabet, other companies like that, Microsoft, to the current AI and semiconductor boom. The underlying moves are even more revealing. Ensign Peak actually sold about 1.1 million NVIDIA shares, reducing the position by 4.8%, but the value still climbed even higher, $4.02 billion to $4.39. By contrast, Ensign Peak made a very aggressive move into AMD, more than doubling its holdings from 700,000 shares to 1.42 million. And folks on Reddit were making comments noting that this looked like an intentional sort of play on the AI market, not just a rebalancing, but doubling their position was something that seemed really intentional.
And profitable.
Well, yes, and very profitable. By the way, Micron went up a ton in the last year, and they made a ton of money off of that. So for sure. But I'll just say that some of this AI exposure seems to reflect deliberate new bets by the church's investment team on the AI market being something significant to make money off of. And it seems like AMD was right at the forefront of the changes and shifts they made during that quarter. And some of this is just the appreciation or growth of these stocks in the market that they already owned. And I know that folks are like, man, $7 billion of growth in one quarter. That's amazing. But really, when we look at it, they actually could have done so much better. The disclosed 13F portfolio was about $37.86 billion at the end of 2019. And it's now $60.82 billion. So it is about a 40% increase there, which is just crazy.
Does that put it lagging behind the rule of 7? Since that 2019 is 7 years ago from 2026 when we're recording this.
You'll have to tell me what the rule of 7 is, RFM.
Rebecca, does that make sense to you? I don't know a lot about finances, and most of what I know is wrong. But doesn't it have to do with doubling your money in 7 years?
Yeah, like it's cyclical, supposedly. But, the year before, they reported that they had lost $3 billion. But a lot of people are saying, well, that's because remember how they divested themselves and liquidated? I can't remember the number, but it was a lot. We reported on that. But yeah, so they lost. Now they've made it up. And I do want to point out this is tax-free money for the most part. Did you guys realize that? $7 billion tax-free. That's how it works when you're a nonprofit. So when the rest of us make money, capital gains. When you're a nonprofit, not so much. So it's a lot of money. And I think that's the secret sauce to how they are able to just, increase. It's just incredible.
If an investment earns 10%, then it should double in 7 years, I think is the idea.
Compound interest, right? It's your best friend especially when you've got this much money working for you. You just said, Rebecca, that this is tax-free, and folks may wonder, like, how can they do that? This is Ensign Peak. Yeah. It's a separate entity, but we covered this in part a few years ago where we explained to the audience that all of the sub companies that are part of the church, Deseret News, the Deseret Industries, obviously Deseret Industries operates as its own nonprofit in a sort, but even the ones that are for profit, they're sort of sub companies under the church. And so when you go to try to find a 990, that's the tax filing for a nonprofit company or the for-profit tax filings, what you end up finding, the church essentially puts out a little cover letter that says this company, whatever company it is a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a sub company, and that church is a nonprofit company essentially, and that all the for-profit companies don't have to report their profits. They don't have to report their numbers. It all goes under this big umbrella of being not for profit. And so, as you point out, Rebecca, almost certainly this money would be tax-free.
Yeah.
And
the widows might have said this is the biggest loophole, honestly, with being a nonprofit. It's such a loophole, and it allows them to just hoard, I guess.
They can be in every business sector they want to be in, and all of it operates as a nonprofit.
Yep.
And part of that is because it's a religion. I think a religion has extra loopholes than what just a standard nonprofit does. And I don't think a regular nonprofit could get away with all of that. But being a religion, it has a lot more, let's say, flexibility.
Can we make the newscast a religion? Is there a way we could do that? I bet people would join if we tried.
I think we could.
I think we could.
I don't know if I would feel good about that, though.
But still, oh my gosh, tax-free. I volunteer to be the prophetess.
There we go. The 13F alone has therefore, again, there's lots of other holdings and investments they have outside of this fund. Some estimates put everything at around 350 billion or more at this point. But this is the Ensign Peak Fund, which is just, again, a slice of the pie. That 13F alone is therefore increased by roughly 23 billion, or about 61% since the portfolio became publicly visible after the SEC fiasco. So there's that. I will just point out that they're showing that Nathan Hall, who knows who this guy is? He doesn't have a large social media presence, so not sure about that. But
it's a common sounding name.
It is. It's a common sounding name, Nathan Hall. He is now the person signing as Ensign Peak's chief financial officer. The Q1 2026 filing was signed by Don Klaus as CFO. So there's that. I've got just a silhouette there because we don't know who these people are. I can't find pictures of them, and I have no idea what their background is. So there's that. The Q2 growth, it sounds big. It is. I mean, 7 billion is a lot of money, but it was like 13.3% that quarter. And I'll just note that we talked about this before in our conversations, that they don't need to have all of these employees. If they would just take all of their money and stop playing games with taking out of NVIDIA and putting into AMD and pulling from Micron and putting it into Microsoft, if they would stop playing those games and just take their money and put it just into the S&P 500 and have one guy take care of it, then they would have earned about 15% in the same quarter. And I don't know, LDS Church, I'm just going to see if I can be of help to you, but there's these things called momentum ETFs. An ETF is a one stock essentially, but it's bought into lots of other stocks. And a momentum fund every so often rebalances its money so that you essentially are always in the up and coming companies that have momentum and are experiencing significant growth. And if the church would have just thrown all of its money into a momentum fund, one of those is SPMO for all of you out there, it would have earned 45%, I think, for that quarter. And so they could have done a lot better. They're not even keeping up with the S&P 500. So the way to look at this, if they had taken that 53.67 billion and just put it into the S&P 500, they would have increased by 8.16 billion instead of the 7.15 that they did. If they would have gone into SPMO, they would have made 23.78 billion. Plus they're paying all those employees, who are working on behalf of prophet seers and revelators and getting worse than average results. I wouldn't stand for it if I was them. I wouldn't tolerate it. So there's that. I'll just finish off here. Want to invest like the church? Some people have tried to follow that. Some members I've heard go like, I try to hear what the church is investing in, and then I make my investments match that. Well, number one, you'd always be a quarter behind, and some companies do better or worse the next quarter. But also, the church isn't doing as good as the S&P 500, folks. Just take your money and put it into the S&P 500, and you'll do just fine over the long run, better than the church has done the last decade, just FYI. But if you do want to invest like the church, again, it is there. NVIDIA, 7.2% of the fund, Microsoft, 4.1%, Alphabet, 5.9%, Amazon, 3.5%, Micron, 2.2%, and AMD, 1.4% of the fund.
And if you're smarter than I was, you'll take that 10% the church wants off the top and you'll invest it on your own behalf.
Yeah, if you want to do charity, do real charity. But if not, invest it. All right, sorry, excuse me. There's the last one. Ensign Peak's publicly disclosed U.S. stock portfolio jumped. We've said that already, 53.67 to 60.82. That sounds pretty impressive. Again, when you look at these other funds, it really isn't. I'll just finish with the last paragraph. So apparently the gift of prophecy does not extend to consistently beating the S&P 500 index fund. In fact, much of that eye-popping $7.15 billion may simply reflect the fact that the market itself had a monster quarter, especially AI and semiconductor stocks, which raises a slightly awkward question. If the Lord's investment managers are repeatedly trailing the S&P 500 and getting smoked by something as uncomplicated as a momentum ETF, exactly what supernatural advantage are we seeing here? Well, none, but maybe they just have nothing to do with that. Obviously, they let the investment managers run it. This isn't a thing you'd want to pick up the phone and call God on the hotline for. So they let the minions take care of it, and they're not doing too good, but they let them keep doing it year after year, quarter after quarter.
Not only are we not seeing inspiration, I don't even think we're seeing competence.
No, we're not seeing competence at all. All of us can just put some money into the S&P 500. And as we pointed out before, almost every quarter, the S&P 500 performs better than the Lord's investment managers over at Ensign Peak. So folks over at Ensign Peak, you're doing really good over there. We give you a round of applause and a pat on the back. So that's all I've got. Anything else from you guys?
I just want to suggest more prayer meetings. That's got to be it. You need to be praying more.
That'll do it. Well, I say that I feel very invested in their successes because literally I am invested with 10% of my income for a number of years. And my parents, as I've described, 30% of their income for life went to the church. So, I should root for the church because all of our money is in there, right? And
Your
I will
parents
point
are
out
really set
that
up for the hereafter.
what?
Your parents are really set up for the hereafter.
Yeah, if there was a hereafter, they would be. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it doesn't work out that way, right? Yeah, heaven forbid they should leave something for their family. No, it's not going to happen. But I will point out that back in the day, investing in the stock market was sort of considered gambling.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't official church policy. People will call me on that. But there were people that said that. My parents felt that was gambling and did not invest. They had a 401k, but they didn't do their own investing. And that was a thought. Don't do that. And yet, here we are with these investments heavily in AI. That's so surprising to me because we have reported over and over here on the newscast how many talks, how many lectures, how many articles about be wary, be very careful of AI, right? So we'll see. I don't know how far this will go as far as the church getting involved in AI. We're going to have to find out. All right, let's move to, I believe, here we go. This slide here always indicates that it's RFM segment, doesn't it?
I think every general conference, at least since I joined the church, has been an exhibition of artificial intelligence.
Oh, there you go.
Weekly Mormon, CSAM. We're calling it CSAM now. I understand that is the understood, accepted phrase. CSAM, child sexual abuse material, is what it stands for. Segment, and this indeed is about the material. A Provo man sentenced after police said he distributed child pornography. Okay. Now, I look at these headlines sometimes and they do make me smile, not because of the subject matter, but because of the syntax. I know everybody's really, really scared about saying somebody's guilty before they're found guilty and not saying alleged enough. But if a guy's sentenced, I would hope it would be more than just after police said he distributed child pornography. Obviously, he would have had to have been found guilty of it before he was sentenced. And indeed, that is the case. Dateline, Provo. A Provo man accused of collecting and distributing child pornography will be spending time in jail and on probation. Jacob Bunker, 26, pleaded guilty to attempted aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor, a second-degree felony, and was sentenced on July 29th to 1 to 15 years in prison. 4th District Judge Robert Griffin suspended that sentence and instead ordered him to serve 300 days in jail with credit for the 250 days he already served and be on probation for 4 years. Bunker was charged in November after the FBI Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force arrested another man and found social media chats between that man and Bunker. Charging documents said those chats included him saying he wanted to sexually abuse a preschool classroom and would like a calling in his church overseeing young children. Every parent's nightmare. Charging documents also accused him of sending what appears to be a self-produced video of child sexual abuse material. That's quote unquote from the document. And establishing a social media group chat where he and others discussed sexual interest in children. Yes, they're out there, folks. After being arrested, charges said Bunker admitted to using social media to talk to others and make arrangements to sexually abuse children, but said he would then delete the account. He said he had never abused a child. While on probation, the judge ordered Bunker to not contact children, obtain full-time employment, complete a psychosexual evaluation, and follow anything it recommends, stay away from online dating sites, and have no active dating profiles, provide all usernames and passwords to adult probation and parole on request, and not use any alcohol or recreational marijuana. Jacob Bunker accepted a plea deal on June 10th that reduced the charge he pleaded guilty to from aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor, a first-degree felony, and dismissed 3 charges for enticing a minor, a second-degree felony. And that is the end of that story. Any comments?
I will just say that people who want to be in callings at church or in positions with children for those kinds of reasons can usually find a way to get in those positions. It should be a wake-up call, this story, to any parent who has young children at church. They're going to find a way to get access to the people that they want to have access to.
It is so easy in the LDS Church, and I'm glad you brought this up, Rebecca. I know we've talked about it before, but you have to be a member of the church to understand this. And if you are for any period of time, you will understand that everybody's got a calling. That's the idea. Everybody's supposed to have a calling, a job in the church, right? And there's teachers everywhere for all age groups. There's all these teachers for kids, okay? So there's all these callings that have to be filled. And the younger the kids get, the more difficult it is, as a rule, to find people to fill those callings, such that you start throwing your worst people at these callings just in order to get them filled. In other words, they're not your top-notch people that you're drawing upon for your other callings throughout the ward if you're the bishop. And a lot of times you just try and get people in there, slapdash, just get someone in there to open the manual and occupy the time. And that plays right into the hands of people like this Bunker character.
Yeah. Mormonism, as we've showed week after week, month after month, year after year, is a safe space for people who want to abuse to show up and find opportunities to carry that out. And, this guy went so far as creating a group to sort of head up others with these, with this propensity to do these things. And he was sort of doing it out in the open almost. And thank goodness that law enforcement got him, it appears, before he was able to do anything serious. So in terms of actually abusing a kid, correct?
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank goodness.
Well, the psychosexual evaluation, which it sounds like it's in the future that he has to take, will undoubtedly have a polygraph component to it in which such questions will be asked. And his passing the psychosexual evaluation is dependent in part on his passing the polygraph.
Okay.
That was that story. I'm going to throw it back to you, Rebecca.
Well, thank you, RFM. Somebody has to cover these. It's very important, and you're the one to do it. So, all right, let's move to a little more lighthearted story here. Our next one, if I'm in the right order here, let me see if I can see the slides. Yeah, I don't have the whole. Oh, good. It is my story. And I'm calling this Avoid the Appearance of Evil. This is President Oaks. It's his 94th birthday. We all remember the big milestone birthdays that President Nelson had. I mean, oh my goodness, there were countdowns on the church website. There were balloons. There were parties. I did look back in time, and President Nelson did not have that level of a birthday for his non-milestone birthdays like 94. So this is pretty typical. President Oaks spent it at home, quietly, presents, a meal, gifts. However, somebody pointed out, and I think we all noticed this, front and center, right in the middle on the church news, there is a fluted goblet on the table with some, a liquid in it, right? Now, I made a post about this and I said, President Oaks turns 94 today and celebrates quietly at home with a glass of ? And I said, I know it's not wine. And I'll say that now. I know it's not. I know President Oaks is not drinking. However, when I was growing up LDS, I never would have been allowed to even hold or own that type of glass, the appearance of evil. And this is absolutely true. I tried to have a prom, big fancy dinner, and I wanted to go buy some goblets because it looked fancy and grown up. Absolutely not. We do not put liquid in a fluted stem glass. That doesn't happen. Some people in the chat are going to say that's crazy. Your parents are crazy. Other people are going to say, yes, that's true. And this post got almost 300 comments. People wanted to weigh in. So I kind of synthesized the kind of comments that were there, which I thought were interesting. But as I was scrolling in on the glass just to see if I could learn any more about it, I noticed that behind it is sort of a tumbler. And I asked ChatGPT, what is this glass? And they said, oh, you put bourbon in that. So they broke out all the glasses. I have no idea what that other glass behind that is. But again, appearance of evil. So in the comments in Reddit, I couldn't go through almost 300 of them, but they kind of broke down into certain ones. A lot of people said we were absolutely taught not to do this, right? Somebody said, oh, our bishop called coffee cups cocoa cups. My own mom called coffee tables cocoa tables. It was all about the appearance of evil. And you would never have had a glass like that. And I think people in this camp would have been shocked to see that glass front and center on the church news with President Nelson's birthday. Of course, other people said it's not wine, it's Martinelli's. I know that. The Mormon champagne, somebody called it. But again, just to have it front and center right there on the church news would have been really surprising to people like my parents. Other people said the issue isn't what's in the glass, it's the old double standard. And that's exactly it. Upper leadership maybe can do something a little different than the rest of us who aren't supposed to do things like that, like have a fluted goblet, right? Some other people said the glass may have been deliberately included by PR. This was interesting to me. Some people were saying there is no way that's an accident. They look at those pictures very carefully. They curate those pictures. Perhaps it's there to make President Oaks appear more, we're not abnormal. We do normal celebrations. We have normal beverages, right? He looks a little more worldly, right? A little more like a global faith leader. Maybe that's why it's there. So I think this is why it just elicited so many comments. There were so many layers to this glass. A lot of people talked about their own appearance of evil story. Somebody got in trouble for bringing hot chocolate in a Starbucks cup to seminary, things like that. Like I said, coffee cake at my house was called breakfast cake. We couldn't even say the word coffee because, I don't know, it might invite the devil in. I don't know. I know there's different ways people were raised, but I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. And my main point here is a lot of people said that was the culture, right? That was the culture, not the doctrine. But this is my point here. And this is what I want to talk about just for a second. When members across generations, I'm talking about me, my parents, remember being taught the same unwritten rules, at what point does Mormon culture become part of your lived religion? And beyond that, because if everybody remembers the rule, everybody followed the rule, and everybody knew that there were consequences to breaking the rule, that's an important part, was it really just the culture? And to me, that's what that wine glass right in the middle there represents. So I thought I'd just, like I said, a little more lighthearted, something to think about. But what do you guys think about the appearance of evil and President Oaks having sort of a wine goblet right there in the center? Bill, your thoughts, and then RFM?
So I agree with you. It almost assuredly isn't an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah, of course not.
Well, you say that. I say this entity preaches, these men talk about honesty and they're not honest.
Right.
There are other Mormon virtues that they throw out that they aren't. So if I found out that a Mormon leader was drinking in the privacy of his own home, would it surprise me? It wouldn't, because they've already told me that honesty matters and we know with them it doesn't matter. So this would be, to me, is a lesser sin than the financial fraud with the SEC, for instance. So no, I wouldn't put a guarantee that it's not alcoholic, although I would say it almost assuredly isn't. But it wouldn't surprise me if Mormons leaders were found to be breaking other rules when I already know they break some?
Yep.
Mm.
Great point.
Yeah. So if you go back here, I just want to know if you could zoom in a little bit further on this glass and find out whether those are President Oak's uppers or lowers at the bottom.
Oh gosh.
That's the one thing I want to know about that. And President Oaks, he's having trouble avoiding the appearance of evil because he's too occupied trying to avoid the appearance of Gollum.
Well, there were some comments that I should not have even smiled at. Things like, "No, that's his sample, waiting for the home health nurse to pick it up." I mean, things like that. Yeah, I don't know, but there was one last kind of theme going on in this Reddit post, and that was the china cupboard, right?
Mm.
Do we all remember the china cupboard that our parents and grandparents, you
Mm.
never used these freaking dishes. They were just there. They were just gathering dust. And if you look in here, you've got some cocoa cups in the cupboard. So maybe they just needed an occasion to break out the china. And perhaps it's what?
I like how the picture is structured such that it looks like President Gollum has a halo.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But someone in the chat just brought up perhaps this whole little controversy, if it is a controversy, is meant to distract from the fact that, he flew halfway around the world to dedicate a temple. And should a 94-year-old really be doing that?
Yes, really.
That's kind of elder abuse. So
I want to add, because I think it's important, that it is not appropriate to pray to heavenly Gollum.
you will not let that go, will you? You just won't let it go.
There's a resemblance. You're going to tell me that if you're walking down the street, you're not going to look twice and think that was Gollum?
I am not going to weigh in on that at all. But I hope you all weigh in on what you think is in that glass, because I'm curious.
The pellet with the
right.
poison.
Let's move on to our next. Oh, looks, we know who's up next
Lord.
when we see again this slide. RFM, what else is going on?
Here we go again, folks. This is from jolly old England, except north up in Scotland and in the northeast part of Scotland. Church leader who was a first counselor in a ward bishopric, as we find out later. This is from the BBC reporting here. Church leader sent indecent messages to vigilante who was posing as children. So this wasn't law enforcement. This was a freelance vigilante. And if you can see where that pin is way up there, that's where this happened, and had to be in a place called Peterhead. One word, that's the name of the town. An Aberdeenshire church leader was caught sending indecent messages to a vigilante who had been posing as children, a court has heard. Craig Ware, 41, admitted 2 offenses of attempting to communicate indecently with children in Peterhead. See, I told you so, Rebecca. In 2024 and 2025, he thought one was a girl aged 13 and that the other was 14, but it was this vigilante, right? At Peterhead Sheriff Court, the first offender was given 300 hours of unpaid work, what we would call community service, as a direct alternative to custody. Ware had been involved with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they got the spelling right, the BBC did. In Mintlaw, this is another place in Scotland, Mintlaw, Mintlaw, one word. However, the church told BBC Scotland, the church told them that this was no longer the case following his arrest. So he's not involved with the church anymore after he got arrested. That's what the church said. At the time of the offense, plural, it is understood Ware, W-A-R-E, was serving as a counselor, a volunteer leadership role that supports with overseeing the local congregation. That's how the BBC described it. I said, i.e., he was a bishopric counselor. And then I said, or branch presidency counselor. But then I got some information from Rebecca, who got it from a source. And this is what Rebecca says, or her source. Craig Ware was first counselor from July 18th, 2021 to August 11th, 2025 in the bishopric of the Buchan Ward, B-U-C-H-A-N, Aberdeen, Scotland stake. And there's the ward on the map, I believe it is. Ware, W-A-R-E, now of Inverness, admitted sending sexual written communications to an adult woman pretending to be a 14-year-old girl. The incident happened between August 2024 and January 2025 in the Clerkhill area of Peterhead and at Keycraft at the Aberdeenshire town's Black House Industrial Estate. The other offense between February and July 2025 involved the same adult whom he believed was a girl aged 13. The court had previously heard the communications were with a member of an online child protection group, which tries to identify people seeking out children on the internet as a direct alternative to custody. Again, with the direct alternative to custody, he orders Ware, W-A-R-E. I keep spelling this because I don't want people to think I'm saying W-H-E-R-E, the word Ware. This is his last name, Ware. He ordered Ware to be supervised for 3 years to carry out the maximum of 300 hours of unpaid work and to take part in the Moving Forward to Change Offender program. He was also placed on the sex offenders register for 3 years. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints said it unequivocally condemned abuse in any form. A statement to BBC Scotland News said, "We mourn with victims of abuse and are deeply concerned for all who may have been harmed or placed at risk." That's the end of that story. And back to you, Rebecca.
Bill, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll just stop there. I wanted to make another joke, but I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's interesting because when I look at people's callings, most of the time people are released. You can, like in this story, everything came out in July. He was released in August. People are released pretty quickly. It seems like after it hits the news or the police, file a report or something. It's official. I'm able to look up, an official, some kind of police statement. And then it seems like they're released pretty quickly in a lot of these stories. But it does make you wonder if behind the scenes, other people were warning or there were red flags and nobody in these wards are doing anything to get this person out of there until it all hits the fan. It's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, if there's anyone out there in the audience who knows any information behind those scenes and what's been going on in the BUCHAN, the Buchan or Buchan ward up there in Scotland, please let us know.
But again, go ahead, Bill.
Just that as we covered this story, we covered the Michael Kleiner story down here in southern Utah, and there are others that go this way too. But we live in a world today that yes, there are. We have the internet. We have people who have access to a wide range of potential victims, and so the people with those kinds of proclivities are obviously have a big venue to go seek that kind of thing out. But we also live in a world where there are tons of law enforcement out there and people like this person who's sort of acting outside of that. And it just occurs to me that, as we move into an age with artificial intelligence, I think you've got to be pretty foolish at this point in time to make those kinds of efforts. And I think it's only going to get more difficult for those folks to do that. And so I think technology is not in their favor. And I think we're going to see a lot more of these kinds of stories. And again, if the LDS Church is a safer space than others, than the median, for that kind of thing to happen, then the LDS Church ought to be aware that as the news cycle moves forward through time, the likelihood that we will continually see more and more of these kinds of stories of people getting caught, to me, becomes more and more likely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it does make you wonder if it's the more naive people that are getting caught, because a more sophisticated person is going to think, okay, no, this might be someone else. This might be an adult, right? And they may find other avenues to try to reach who they're trying to reach. So, but it is interesting. And how interesting to have a vigilante group, that poses online and tries to expose and then turn over to law enforcement. That's fascinating. So thank you, RFM, for covering that story. I think the next one is mine. And this is just another one. I like these kinds of stories because they're what I like to call the I told you so story. Every once in a while I get to do these. And the title is Let the Christianization of LDS Meeting Houses Begin. About a month ago, we reported kind of a breaking story, some plans, some architectural plans for 2 new meeting houses in the Salt Lake area. And they were being built with a center sacrament altar and a center aisle, right? Typically, LDS, for those of you that are never Mormons, they have this weird structure where there are pews on the side aisles, and then a big center section of pews. And we reported, no, they're changing this. It's going to be more like a standard Christian, mainstream Christian church. And we reported it. We showed the plans. We talked about it. And I talked about how the plan was not only to build new meeting houses going forward like this, like the plans that I showed, but to demolish and retrofit and, make existing meeting houses into this model. I got tons of pushback on that. People said, you're crazy. I hear that a lot. You don't know what you're talking about. They would never spend the money to redesign existing meeting houses. People seem to have a hard time with that. And so I was happy to see, again, this is anecdotal, but I think we'll find out more going forward. So this was a post online, and it said, a new church initiative, the Christ-centered meeting house. Right? This is exactly what we were talking about. This person said, I scanned the sub and I can't find a reference to this subject. Last week, out of the blue, all the congregants who worship in our building were invited to an impromptu meeting, which would follow the normally scheduled Sunday meetings. I've been inactive since COVID, but I still interact with believing neighbors, and no one knew the purpose of the meeting, because you never do, right? It's always a secret, like being called into the bishop's office. Our ward has had chronically low attendance since I moved into the neighborhood, so I suspected ward mergers or some kind of boundary realignment, right? That's usually what it is when they call you into a special meeting in addition to your regular meetings. My curiosity got the best of me. I went to the meeting. The opening hymn was, I'll go where you want me to go. That probably tipped off a lot of people thinking, oh, of course, it's boundary change. Do what you want me to do. Mormon courtesy laughs all around. Ha ha. But then they surprised us. No mergers, no realignments. All wards in the building would remain intact. But in October, each of the 4 wards will temporarily relocate to one of 4 other meeting houses in the vicinity. I wonder why they're relocating. The poster goes on to say, it turns out that church is piloting a Christ-centered meeting house idea. This is brand new. No other church has ever done this, I don't think. I'm being, of course, facetious. Beginning in January, our building and 15 other meeting houses in Utah, 15 in Utah, will be gutted. And according to our stake president, who feigned ignorance, walls will be moved around to make the space more inviting and conducive to Christ-centered worship. Construction will take about a year, and then we'll move back into our improved magical meeting house. No drawings were displayed, but through later gossip, I've come to understand the most significant alterations will be in the chapel. Apparently, 3 rows of pews will now be reduced to 2, and the sacrament table will be rejiggered front and center. There you go.
That'll keep people from leaving.
That will. And it's a brand new idea. It's Christ-centered, and it's going to look like every other Christian meeting house has looked for centuries. But anyway, so this is what they're doing. They're going to move wards out. This talks about 15 wards. I'd be curious if anyone in the chat has heard of anything else. But if you remember, I reported from my source that they wanted to have a lot of them retrofitted by the end of 27, and people were like, that's crazy. How can they? This seems to be that plan, right? They're going to move people out. They're going to just do it as quickly as they can. Just to remind everybody, this was what in the plans that I was given. This is what a regular meeting house looks like now. You've got the sacrament table on the side. You've got where the boys preparing the sacrament on the side. Everything in red here on this plan is going to be gone, gutted. Your choir seats, your 3 rows, all of it gone. And then the new plan is going to look like this. It's a reduction. I didn't talk about this before, of about 30 choir seats. Now that's kind of interesting.
Look at all the pews. You can't, it's going to look a lot more full.
And a lot of people said that. Yep. A lot of people said, I wonder if this is just to make more inviting, meaning you don't walk in and go, oh, God, nobody's here. I don't know if I want to be here. It is going to fill up, right? And again, the sacrament altar right in the middle and the areas where the boys will sit. Other people have pointed out this gives a strong priesthood presence right there. Any girls sit in the audience and seeing the wall of men in front of them will absolutely understand their place. So we're going to keep watching, but this is one of the first little signs that I saw that they're doing this with existing buildings. So any thoughts on the new retrofit bill and then RFM?
My question is, if this is the new Christ-centered meeting house, and this is to help facilitate the new Christ-centered worship, what were the meeting houses and the worship centered on before?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think we know, right?
I'm just waiting for a cross to go up.
Everybody says that. I mean, they won't put it on the drawings. This is a rendering from, the plans that I got a hold of. They won't say it, but I can see it. There's a place for it. It's right there, there
Yeah,
it
they
is.
call it on top of the steeple. That's where most people put them.
On top of the steeple, but also in the main structure. They always have crosses there when you go in. So we'll see. But it sure is different. Again, rolling in your grave, right? You got a wine goblet on a prophet's table. You got a center sacrament aisle. This ain't your parents' or your grandparents' LDS church. That's for sure.
I just want to say one thing, Rebecca. You were right.
No one ever says that to me. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, let's move forward. Oh, is this also my story? How funny. Boy, I'm just tearing it up here. Okay. This I have to preface. My article is going to be about marriage rates at BYU. But my favorite movie when I was growing up on Sunday, I wasn't allowed to watch TV, but I could check out movies from the Ward Meeting House. And they had old movies. This particular one we're going to show a little clip from was from 1969. It's called Never a Bride. It's about an old maid of 18 who goes to her aunt's dude ranch to try to meet a man because everybody else she knows is married and she's an old maid. She just barely graduated from high school. And so this is a little clip. I would suggest everybody Google this, go watch it. Never a Bride. I can't even tell you how many times I watched this on Sundays when I was growing up.
I think this is going to be my favorite movie too.
It's fantastic. It's only 20 minutes long. We're watching a small clip, but again, she's just not married and she's just graduated from high school. Whatever will she do? Oh, there should be sound. The sound makes it really fun. So, because it's that
when the golf cart
60s
bursts
sound.
into
Yeah,
flame.
start over if we can with sound. Oh, wait, here it is. Okay.
How's the tourist trade? Oh, fine.
Oh, that's pretty low. Can we turn it up at all?
They're nowhere. No. And
Doesn't get any louder? Dang it. I watched the whole thing the other day and it was pretty loud. So,
How long is
all
it?
right. Huh?
How long is it? And who's in charge of the hair?
It's 4 minutes. The clip is like 2 minutes long. That's all. It's all good. Okay, Bill, I'm just going to tell everybody to go out and get this video. It's absolutely fantastic. But she's complaining there are no men on the dude ranch, and her aunt's trying to cheer her up. And again, oh, did I hear something? I guess
don't know.
We can just go to the next slide then. Everybody look it up. Never a Bride. It's fantastic. I have to admit I watched it twice over the weekend. It's so fun.
But the basic idea being that in 1969, the church was producing films about how kids, especially girls here, need to get married as soon as they graduate high school. Is that it?
That is exactly right. They or they're engaged in getting married. Yeah, exactly. Like the day after kind of thing. So I think my slides are out of order here. But the article is called Marriage Rates at BYU Are Declining. Here's how the LDS school is stepping in to play Cupid. And I just had to point out, would you ever see a headline that said marriage rates at Harvard are declining? Here's how the school is stepping up to play Cupid. Marriage rates at MIT are declining. Here's how you just would not see this headline. But at BYU, you're going to see this headline, right? And not only this headline, but we know we've reported about this on the newscast. Let me scroll forward to my slides here. So many articles, right? So many articles, mostly from President Oaks since he became the prophet, all about it's time to get married, right? Look at all the things that he changed. The mission age for girls is younger. It's okay to pursue romantic attachments on your mission. It's okay to find the one, right? Don't delay having a family. Don't delay marriage. I mean, the kids are just absolutely bombarded, but the statistics are, as we'll see in this article, that they're just not getting married, at least not at BYU. So it says, let's see here. Okay. For decades, BYU has had a reputation for being a place where students go to get education and a spouse, right? But new numbers show that fewer BYU students are getting married and at the university, and the church leaders and university leaders are taking notice. Why? Like I said, headlines, MIT, they're not getting married. Nobody cares. It's only BYU. According to a new report from the Salt Lake Tribune, in the fall of 2021, about 25% of BYU students were married. That's huge compared to national statistics. But by the fall of 2025, that number had fallen to about 17%. Oh dear, that's a problem. BYU's own current enrollment statistics confirm that 17% married student body figure. And here is the important context that's still extraordinarily high compared to American colleges, as I said. The Tribune reports that only about 4% of U.S. college students aged 19 to 23 are actually married. The rest of the students, 96%, are in college, partying, getting degrees, right? So BYU students are still marrying at a much higher rate than their peers nationally. They're just not marrying at a rate that they once did. And that is very concerning to everybody, especially our prophet, who's making statement after statement about this and trying to make changes to force young people together, right? The church has traditionally placed enormous theological importance on marriage. In Latter-day Saint belief, eternal marriage isn't simply encouraged. Temple sealing is tied to the highest degree of exaltation. As we know, President Oaks has recently urged young people not to unnecessarily delay marriage or starting families. So BYU is experimenting with ways to get students off of the dating apps and into actual dating, right? Love potion number 9. One example highlighted by the Tribune is a Night of Lights date night that they organized last year. They had all kinds of different activities, and you could buy tickets and have a date. I remember reporting on that, and most of the students said, that was fun. I took my roommates. They're just not coupling up, but they did have fun at the activity. One student told the Tribune that marriage is on everybody's mind and on their own mind more often than they would like. And this is true. I've had kids come home from missions. I've had kids that are a little older when they get married. And I remember making the joke to one of my kids, it's totally fine. If you wait a few years, you can marry people that are now divorced from your former mission companions, right? And even my TVM child said, yeah, true that. Because that's another thing that's happening, I think, is a lot more kids not having kids early, and marriage is not working out. They're just cutting ties at 2 or 3 years and moving on. I anecdotally have seen that with a lot of young people that I know. Let's talk about BYU Idaho, another school famous for young marriages, I think even more famous than BYU, and it's experiencing a similar decline. 2018-19, 30% almost of the students were married. That's huge, 30%. But by fall of 2025, that had fallen to 23%, with only about 1 in 5 on-campus students married. Again, this is so foreign to anyone else going to college, any other school. But at BYU and BYU Idaho, this is the focus. The actual number of married students declined to more than 2,600 during that period. So what is happening? The Tribune says some BYU Idaho faculty point to broader changes in dating culture. Young adults socialize differently. Dating apps. Here I have a picture of all the different apps you could jump on to find somebody. And there may simply be more isolation and less face-to-face interaction than there has been in previous generations. Those of us that have kids of that age, I think we can kind of see that kind of thing happening. But there's another way to look at these numbers. Maybe LDS young adults aren't necessarily rejecting marriage. They are just simply moving forward and closer to the marriage patterns of the rest of their generation, right? Young Americans generally are marrying later than previous generations. And even after this dramatic decline, a BYU student is still several times more likely to be married than your typical college student. And I will say this, I have a picture here of a young couple, and anecdotally, this is what couples are thinking about. They're not rushing into it. They're going, how the heck am I going to get a house? Can I even have kids? What about the economy? What are we going to do? We better finish school first. How are we going to move forward? What kind of support is there for us? So the question then is not why aren't BYU students getting married? It's, is BYU experiencing a dating crisis, or are young Latter-day Saints simply beginning to approach marriage like everybody else in their age group? And I think that's an interesting question. I wonder what they think when they listen to all this rhetoric from President Oaks and others. I wonder if some of them just shake their head and say, are you going to help us get a house? Are you going to help us finish our education if we're married and have 2 kids? I mean, those are real world problems right now that I feel even when I was married, and I was in my master's program when I was married. So I didn't have kids yet, but
Rebecca,
yes.
my experience over 50 years, almost now in the church, is that they treat this whole issue of marrying too young and taking on all these responsibilities and having kids. They treat it as a big joke.
Of course they do, but it's not a joke. I mean,
As if you
maybe,
young whippersnappers, you don't
yeah,
realize that we
yeah,
all have to go through this, and we went through this too. And
yeah,
so this will
no.
be for your own good. So just hurry up and get married and start having kids.
Yeah, it's not the same at all. I mean, back in the day, my day, like one income could usually get a house. Usually there could be a stay-at-home mom. A lot of us have kids that are married. They're both professional. They're both working, and they can't afford housing here in Utah, meaning you could move somewhere else. But these are real problems that are happening. And those of us that have kids of that age, as you know, this is what they're facing. So anyway, thoughts on just the churches continually just pelting the kids with this, get married, get married, get married. And what are the kids really thinking? Bill, what are your thoughts?
The world is following a certain trajectory, right? So there are less people getting married quickly. People are putting off marriage into older age, right? That's my point, RFM, is that the church school is just following along with the trajectory, with the Mormon influencing, having people getting married a little sooner or more often sooner, having more kids than the world average, but following the same trajectory. I don't think you can really manipulate it much more. I don't think getting a bunch of people together to try to fix the problem actually fixes it. The church's influence already has the Mormon youth or Mormon young adults already getting married slightly earlier than the world average, in the same way they were getting married slightly earlier than the world average 25 years ago. They're having more kids than the world average today, just like they were 25 years ago. You would need the world's trajectory to change to have some sort of magical influence that this changes and becomes something that the church leaders want it to become. And so my prediction is they'll be moving the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, but the stats will essentially remain exactly the same, following a lagging behind in some categories from the world, moving ahead from the world, but showing up in the same sort of similarity that they did 25 years ago.
The reason I'm laughing is because with the new models for the chapels, they literally are rearranging the chairs.
Yeah, by the way, they're building that picture of the chapel. They're building chapels in anticipation of smaller wards.
Yeah.
They're building buildings that say we don't actually expect our congregations to get bigger. We actually are building congregation settings that will accommodate a much smaller group of people.
Can I just tell you this story? I don't know if I've told it before, but I remember it. It was shortly before I went on my mission. It was probably around the summer of 1979. We are at a dance, a young adult dance or whatever the heck it was, at some ward building, and it's after hours. It's shut down. We're out in the parking lot. It's probably after 1 o'clock. We're hanging out and we're talking. And I remember this one guy, and I can't remember his name right now, but he's talking about this church building owned by the Reorganized, still Reorganized at the time, right? The Organized Church, that they were selling somewhere in the city. And it was just like, wow, it's just too bad that they have to sell their thing while their church building, while we're growing like gangbusters and having sort of this faux funeral, this kind of, pseudo mourning for the poor Reorganized who weren't growing the way the Lord's true church was.
Yeah.
Yep. That was always the kind of smugness. Look at us. But, we talked about retention last week, about how that's a huge problem, people not staying in. And I think upper leadership realizes their best chance at having somebody stay. It's not a convert. That's probably not going to happen. It's someone born into it and raised in it. That is their chance. So at least they want people to replace themselves, right? But like you're saying, Bill, anecdotally, the couples I know, maybe they're having one kid. They're going, I don't know. We're going to think about it. I mean, I don't even see a lot of young people having 2 kids right now. And they already have like a 4-year-old. That was unheard of in my day. I mean, when I had my 2.5-year-old, people were looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Where's the next one? So it's changing really fast, and smaller membership, that's just going to be reality as people are not replacing themselves, and it's just shrinking. And I can see where they're worried. But I agree with you, Bill, just putting people together, that's not going to work. Like the date night, everybody went and had fun, but they just hung out, right? They just hung out with girlfriends, they just hung out as kids, and no reason to hook up. So anyway, interesting. We'll keep an eye on it, but certainly concern out there. They did authorize more married student housing at BYU recently. I can't remember if we did a story on that, but it kind of fits here. So maybe that's to encourage people, but they are building new Y-Mount Terrace. If you guys are familiar with that, that
How
place.
does it fit here? How does it fit here? Doesn't it do the exact opposite if they're building more married student housing while the married student population is decreasing?
Well, no, it's if they build it, they will come, right? Like imagine you can't find housing. You're like, you know what? There's space in the married housing. Why don't I just find somebody? I mean, back in my day in 1984, people would go to Vegas to get married for the semester, right? That was kind of the workaround. That was before soaking. It was get married in Vegas. So everybody finds a workaround. You got to do what you got to do. So, all right, let's move forward to our next story. I think this is Bill.
That's where they would get it annulled the next morning, right?
They would get it annulled at the end of the semester. It was a semester-long free pass. Hey, we're married, right? And then they'd get it annulled before they went home at Christmas break. Yeah, it was problematic.
Nice.
I never did it. I knew people that did, but I did never do it.
I'm starting to feel very self-righteous. It's a good feeling. I'd forgotten how good that feeling is.
The Salt Lake Tribune had an article, will the LDS Church's record number of missionaries keep rising or start to fall? We've talked about this story maybe to death, so I'll be quick, just 2 slides. As we've mentioned before, the LDS Church is currently celebrating a new missionary record with about 88,500 full-time missionaries worldwide, surpassing the previous record of roughly 88,000 set during the post-age change surge in 2015. Remember that into 2019. A major reason is another policy change. The major reason for this one, this time around, is that women can now begin missionary service at 18 rather than 19. And like that age change back in 2014, the first wave of those younger sister missionaries is entering the field. The church has responded to the increased supply by creating 55 new missions in 2026. What this tells me, by the way, is that in 2031, we're going to have to close 67 missions to accommodate the changing trajectory.
We don't close missions anymore. We reorganize them, Bill.
Okay, well, whatever you call it potato, I call it potato. The Salt Lake Tribune, however, is asking whether this represents the beginning of sustained missionary growth or another temporary demographic bubble created by changing eligibility rules. Remember when Elder Holland said, oh, we're going to be at 100,000 missionaries soon, and it went down from there for a while. So here we are in the midst of another surge, and this too shall pass. The longer-term demographics seem to indicate less optimism. The Salt Lake Tribune, by the way, pointing this out, less optimism of continued growth. The church's missionary pipeline ultimately depends heavily on the number of active Latter-day Saint children reaching missionary age. As we've talked about with the procrastinating marriage, with the falling birth rates, particularly in the United States and other developed countries, this means a smaller pool of potential missionaries coming behind today's elders and sisters. Even with the missionary numbers and convert baptisms rising in places like Africa, the church is still facing weaker demographic fundamentals in its traditional North American base. And as you showed the picture last week, Rebecca, of a bunch of children in Africa getting baptized, and all 3 of us asking, like, how many of those kids are active Latter-day Saints in their 30s, 40s, and 50s? And my hunch is very, very few of them. So the church is still facing those weaker demographic fundamentals in North America. U.S. membership actually registered a small net decline in 2025, even as worldwide membership continued growing. So I think we're in a little blip. I think the church is going to have to eat crow here in a few years as those numbers start to tumble downward. And I'm hoping to be around to revel in all of it. So I can't wait to see it.
I doubt there will be a headline that say missionary numbers decline. And
No.
I did an episode with Ron Jorgensen. It is all just the demographics and the stats. It's all the fact that there are more LDS kids. There's a birth bubble like the baby boomer right now. And couple that with the 18-year-old mission age change for women, you're going to have this little surge, but it means nothing. Everything's going to even out. And there's nothing they can do about that. And then going forward, like you said, Bill, birth rate, all of that, retention, loss of converts, they're not going to really be seeing the headlines at all. And I'm surprised they make such a big deal out of it now, because it is only just going to stabilize and go back to the decline where it was before. And they're also counting missionaries differently now. It's hard to even compare exactly what it was before to what it is now, because now they're counting service, full-time, and senior kind of all lumped together. So we don't really know what the number is, but they're going to show those pictures. They're going to show those convert baptisms of only children in Africa, and it's going to look to everybody like things are going really well. But that's the crunch the numbers. If you guys want to look for that episode that I did with Ron, he brought all the stats and really interestingly showed that really across the span of time, only like as high as maybe 35% of eligible people were serving. It really is never very high. And some of the policies at the top, remember, raise the bar. Do you remember that? They're like, oh, this will be great. We'll get only the cream of the crop to go. It plummeted there because nobody can make the cut. Then they lowered the bar. They didn't really make an announcement, lower the bar, but they started letting everybody go. There was a surge back in my senior year, I think it was, where the boys could go for 18 months. A lot of people said, I can do that. I can handle that. So different things they do at the top, manipulate it like they just did with the 18-year-old age change. But that also is rearranging the mission deck chairs because it really doesn't make a difference on the overall trajectory, in the long run. What do you think,
doesn't.
Art?
And what you're doing is you're making a substantial change in the age of the missionaries, because when you're that young, a year is bigger than it is when you're 66. I think there's more difference in the personality and the maturity level at, say, 20 than at 19, and at 19 than at 18. But I don't know. What do you think about this, Bill?
Well, the last thing I'll say about it is that I think this works in a counter effect to the previous story. In other words, if kids are sitting around in the church single longer than the church would like them to be, there's a percentage of them that are going to decide that they might as well go on a mission, and they'll go serve. If we pressure people to get married sooner, we actually might have even less potential missionaries in the here and now. Now, they might be hoping for 18 to 30 years from now, having a larger pool of missionaries. But in the here and now, if you marry them off quickly, that's less people to potentially go on a mission. And so I think they're trying to solve two contradicting problems in the long run that I don't think they can do both. They're going to have to pick one.
I do predict, and I'll just go ahead and put it on the record now, that regardless of how much the missionary numbers may decrease over time from this point on, the church is going to report it increasing anyway.
They'll find a way to spin it somehow.
It's going to get to
some way.
100,000. We will make Elder Holland a true prophet by hook or by crook.
Or we make the change that we don't report missionary numbers anymore.
That could be it. Just trust. That's right. No, and what you said is right, Bill. There's a huge push right now, I believe, to get people married because there are a lot more young people. So just like there were, 22 years ago, you've got to ride these booms out, right? You've got to get those extra couples all married so they can produce more children. So 18 years from now, you're going to have another surge in growth. And that's really their only shot, because it's not retention. It's not, converts. It's none of that. And as we talked about last week, more young women are leaving the church. So it's very problematic, even as far as the numbers being skewed. Who can you marry? I will say, if they want to increase their numbers, they should just encourage LDS women to marry somebody outside the faith. I think that might work. Just find a Christian person, have a child. If that's really what you want, raise them in the church. I don't know. They have to do something. So It'll be interesting to watch. All right. I think, Bill, do you have our next story too? Or are we back to RFM? I think we're back to this one is interesting. And I think there's a lot of stuff to clear up because everybody keeps texting me saying, this is Tim Ballard. It isn't, and it is. Let us know what's going on, RFM.
Well, what happened is that we all remember a few years ago when Tim Ballard flamed out spectacularly right after his big movie came out. And then we find out that he'd been forced to step down from the CEO-ship of the company, or the Underground, what was it? OUR, Operation Underground Railroad was the name of it, OUR. And we find out that all this stuff had been going on. And of course, then there come all the allegations of sexual misconduct against him from various women who were associated and or employees with OUR. So this guy is the guy who is, Tim Ballard goes on, creates another organization. He's doing his own thing now. He's not involved with OUR. OUR changed its name because, of course, and now they are instead called, we'll get to it here in a second, but this is the guy who's the head of it now. And his name, I think, is Bennett. All right. So what's going on is he's running this organization, Our Rescue. That's what it's called. OUR, Our Rescue. You can see the similarity there. But historically, trying to save kids and talking to, ancient Nephite prophets through modern day living psychics is what they've been doing. They haven't been providing a lot of legal defense or legal representation for anybody, including the kids that, are coming across the border and are in the legal system, right? The immigration legal system. So providing legal services for people in the system is something that the government is required to do. The federal government then took $244 million and gave a contract. We can understand them giving a contract to a company that provides legal services in order for them to provide the legal services that the federal government has to provide. The strange thing is that they end up giving it to this guy and his organization, which is not known for doing legal services at all, to my knowledge. Does anybody know about this? I have never heard about this. And neither has some other guy who's going to be quoted in this story. But this fellow did used to work for Homeland Security, and so maybe that's it. This may be an unsurprising story about a company that may not be the best fit, getting a nice contract because of connections rather than other companies that perhaps might have been better that don't have the contacts. The Trump administration has awarded a nearly $250 million contract to Utah-based Our Rescue, there's the name, formerly Operation Underground Railroad, to coordinate legal representation for unaccompanied immigrant and refugee children, a task the group is not known for providing. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services awarded the contract worth as much as $244 million over up to 5 years Friday. Under the terms of the agreement, Our Rescue, which is now led by a former top official in Trump's Department of Homeland Security, that's that Bennett guy, will be responsible for providing immigration-related legal services for some 24,000 children with pending cases. Our Rescue. Now, this is a quote from this guy named Michael Lukens, who does another. I think he's the head of another group that he thinks would have done a better job, and so obviously he's not happy that he didn't get the contract, but he's putting in his 2 cents about the fact that he feels that Our Rescue. I mean, they don't do legal services. How come the government's given them the contract? Here's what he says: Our Rescue is wholly unqualified, said Michael Lukens, executive director of Amica Center, Rebecca, for Immigrant Rights, one of nearly 100 entities that provide legal representation for the immigrant children. So there's like 100 of them. This is one of them, and Our Rescue isn't. They do not do this work, he says. They do not have any immigrant defense attorneys. They don't have a national network. Traditionally focused on combating child trafficking. This is Our Rescue is traditionally focused on combating child trafficking, working on training and equipping law enforcement, although it has provided services for victims of trafficking as well. The group's website does not mention providing legal representation. I mean, that's how little they're associated with it. It's not even on their own website. But I expect they'll be able to cut off a nice juicy chunk in order to what? Arrange and pay for other attorneys to provide the services. A spokesperson for Our Rescue did not respond to questions about what, if any, legal work Our Rescue may have done in the past and referred questions about the scope of the contract to HHS, which likewise did not respond. Our rescue is steadfast on our mission to help vulnerable children across the U.S. and around the world. Our rescue CEO, Derek Benner, it's Benner, said, I've been saying Bennett, Benner, Benner, Derek Benner, said in a statement, ensuring that unaccompanied alien children have access to qualified legal counsel and are protected from child exploitation and human trafficking fits squarely within this mission. We'll just make it up as we go. These are among the most vulnerable children in the world, and they deserve nothing less than the full weight of our experience, which has nothing to do with providing legal services. I added that last part. We welcome this responsibility and are working on their behalf. I'm sure they welcome this responsibility. And the $244 million that goes with the responsibility. And I think, is there more here? There's a little bit more. Benner was the executive associate director of Homeland Security investigations and served in several other positions at Immigration and Customs Enforcement during President Donald Trump's first term. Operation Underground Railroad was founded in 2013 by Tim Ballard. The origin story for OUR was the loose inspiration for the movie Sound of Freedom, very loose, if you know what I mean, in 2023, and Ballard used his notoriety to turn OUR into a high-profile anti-trafficking group, bringing in more than $50 million a year. Revenues fell to $35 million last year. Can you imagine they're making $35 million still? But just before the movie's release, if we all cast our minds back 3 years ago, Ballard was ousted from his position and amid allegations that he had sexually abused multiple women associated with the organization. He has adamantly denied wrongdoing. Multiple civil lawsuits were filed against Ballard, some of which have since been dismissed. There have been no criminal charges filed. After Ballard's departure, OUR rebranded as Our Rescue. Benner has been the CEO of Our Rescue since April 2025. And that's the end of that story. Back to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, I just can't look at any picture of Tim Ballard without thinking we reported on it so much of, the tattoo. Remember?
Schlagen?
Where we all learned a new word.
What's the word schlagen?
No, I don't even know what that word means. No, I'm not going to say the word.
Remember.
I'm sure Bill can pull up the image. Remember, he was trying to look all edgy, so he put a fake tattoo on him.
Yeah, was it Wiener?
No,
it was something it was like jacuzzi.
It was Spanish.
There was a J. Yoder. Yoder. Was it Yoder? Yoder. Joder, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I know
Which
my
is
Tim
terrible.
Ballard tattoo.
I shouldn't have even brought that up, but every time I see a picture of him, I just think of that. So, and
I know every inch of his
Our Rescue last year made $35 million. Can you imagine suddenly getting $244 million from the Trump administration? And a lot of other people are just saying, there is nothing in their wheelhouse on their website. They have absolutely no knowledge or expertise. They've never done this, but I can't remember if you or Bill said, they can obviously take some of that money and go hire a law firm that specializes in that. But it really does beg the question, why? Yeah, why, when there are other firms that do this already, provide legal counsel for children and stop them from being exploited, why this group? And I still feel somehow perhaps Tim Ballard is involved. I don't know. I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I nobody can seem to explain it. Bill, what do you think?
I'm just surprised we didn't get a group of Somalians to run this out of the state of Minnesota. I don't know.
Okay, I'll be taking off right now, folks.
Bill, oh, wow, he's gone. There you go. He really left. Bill's on a roll. We need that drum roll, but I'm bump, right?
I figure somebody has to be the conscience of the show.
That's right. Thanks for taking a stand for 2.4 seconds. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, right. Stand I've ever taken, actually.
All right. If we have no more thoughts on that story, which is very interesting because a lot of people thought it was Tim Ballard. A lot of people texted me, oh my gosh, Tim Ballard's getting all this money. I'm like, no, but it is connected and it is kind of dicey. So I'm glad that you showed us the facts on that. So
they call me Mr. Yoder.
I know, maybe Bill can find that picture. Maybe,
In the heat of the night.
like I don't want to see it, but then I kind of do
$10.
want to see it just to
They
laugh.
call me Mr. Yoder.
Oh my God. Anyway, Bill's next story. I've been waiting for this one because I saw Peggy put this out on Facebook and ask people's suggestions of what new temple recommend questions should be. If you could write the temple recommend questions. And this is a fascinating article, kind of shows what's on people's minds, right? And they don't necessarily think what they're asking now is relevant or even important if you call yourself a follower of Christ.
Yeah, the Salt Lake Tribune asked the question, what questions should be added to the LDS Temple Recommend interview? And, they end that by saying, here's what you said, because they received over 400 responses to that. And so they essentially were pointing out, we've got in the LDS Church, we've got these Temple Recommend questions. And what would it look like if you, the readers of the Salt Lake Tribune, submitted what you think the questions should be? And so when you juxtapose the submissions with the actual Temple Recommend questions, there's quite a difference, at least in the answers that the Salt Lake Tribune published. I will grant that of those 400 responses, we only got to read a handful or two. But what the Salt Lake Tribune published seemed to be questions that posed a much different thing that they're trying to get at than what the LDS Church is getting through theirs. And so the current Temple Recommend interview defines worthiness largely around things like having the prescribed beliefs, having the right sexual behaviors, keeping the right health code, paying a full tithing, Sabbath day observance, sustaining church leaders, and keeping temple covenants. But when the Tribune asked people, okay, what's missing? Then you end up in a conversation where it seems clear to me anyway, in the responses that they published, that those who submitted responses wanted a Temple Recommend set of questions that got much more at Christ-like behavior, a Christ-like approach to life, than all of these kind of checking the boxes. And so I was thinking, it sort of comes off as like, what should a healthy religion actually care about when it evaluates the life of one of its members? What tells us whether somebody is becoming a genuinely good, healthy, mature human being? That seemed to be what the respondents were trying to get at. And so what emerged to me was a striking contrast between institutional worthiness and what the respondents were pointing to, which is actual moral character. And so readers proposed questions aimed less at whether someone conforms to LDS institutional requirements and more at how LDS members actually treat other human beings. So whether they are honest, compassionate, generous, willing to repair harm, which, by the way, is an interesting phrase that's sort of part of the other side would call it kind of the woke culture. But it's a language that points to being aware of kind of the trauma that's going on in our society. They wanted to know more about whether members were capable of respecting people who believe differently, whether their religious commitments are making them a better people. And so some of the responses that they got, one of the questions somebody submitted was, how do you treat people who have less power than you, especially when there is nothing for you to gain? Another said, when you discover that you've hurt someone, what do you do to acknowledge and repair that harm? Another person asked, can you allow people you love to disagree with you, leave your religion and live differently without withdrawing love or relationship? And the last one I put here, but there was more than this in the article. Is your religious life making you more compassionate, honest, humble, and curious, or merely more certain that you're right? Now, again, the church is never going to have those kinds of questions, but I did go into AI and I asked it, I said, if you were Mormonism, but you were going to approach the Temple Recommend questions, creating the healthiest set of questions possible. And this is what it spit out. And it really was touching to me to read this and go, if I had been in a church that had prioritized these kinds of ideas, it would have said a lot about what kind of church I was a member of. Number one, do you strive to treat every person with dignity and compassion, including those whose beliefs, identities, values, or life choices differ from your own? 2, do you strive to live honestly and with integrity, even when doing so is personally difficult, embarrassing, or costly? Number 3, when you harm another person, are you willing to acknowledge your responsibility, make appropriate amends, and change your behavior? Number 4, do you respect the agency and autonomy of others, including your spouse, children, family members, and those over whom you have influence, even when they make choices you disagree with? Number 5, are your relationships characterized by consent, mutual respect, appropriate boundaries, and emotional and physical safety? Number 6, do you use your time, resources, and abilities and influence responsibly, balancing your own legitimate needs and generosity toward others and concern for those who are vulnerable or in need? Number 7, do you approach your beliefs with humility, allowing room for uncertainty, respecting the freedom of conscience of others, and remaining willing to learn when you may be mistaken? Number 8, are you caring responsibly for your own physical and emotional well-being, your important relationships, your family responsibilities, and your continued personal growth? Number 9, is your spiritual life helping you become more compassionate, honest, humble, accountable, emotionally mature, and capable of loving others? Number 10, is there anything in your life for which you need greater understanding, support, or resources from your religious community? And as I went over the Salt Lake Tribune's article, again, there were tons of responses shared there, and most of them pointed to people wanting the church to move towards, as it points to, a Christ-like building and Christ-like worship, a Christ-centered building, Christ-centered worship, maybe a Christ-centered temple recommend interview. And that's what people were submitting to the Tribune. And I thought, as I made this list here with AI's help, it struck me that if a church were asking those kinds of questions, it would most certainly be doing a lot better in the areas that the church is really struggling with in terms of honesty, transparency, and accountability. Your thoughts on what question you'd like to add to the Temple Recommend interview? I can't hear you, RFM.
I think that even with those 10, you got to include number 11 for tithing, because they're never going to approve of a list of questions without the tithing being there. That's your price of admission.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to belong to that church. I would. That's beautiful, and I have to say, I at least strive to be able to pass that list. I certainly can't pass a regular Temple Recommend interview right now, but that I think I could make some headway on. So that's a beautiful list. I love that. I see people giving it hearts in the chat. So I just love that. But I think, the church has said publicly, we don't give apologies. So when you start with that as your baseline, and then the questions are all about worthiness, right? And their definition of worthiness, not becoming a Christ-like person. Like you said, Bill, nothing about that. It's all worthiness and checking boxes. So yeah,
The church doesn't actually want you to go anywhere. They just want you to keep running on the treadmill.
Exactly. And also to feel bad, I think, about yourself. The way those questions were worded, even if it was an area that you were working on, it felt like you could maybe talk to your leader, get some pastoral care about, I feel this way. Those were questions that could invite a dialogue where a religious leader, as they should, especially a trained one, be able to talk you through becoming a better person or working on family relationships. The Temple Recommend questions, it's just, yes, no, yeah, and you just come out feeling pretty horrible. Did I answer truthfully? Am I doing enough? Right. And that's not how it should be. That's not what your church is supposed to be.
Yeah. And I'll just say that when I looked at these questions on the right that it came up with, these to me, as I was reading them, I was like, there's so much room to just notice one's own striving to be more Christ-like, one's own growth and progress in becoming a better human being today than they were yesterday, tomorrow than they were today. And I really wish there was that kind of emphasis in the LDS Church rather than like, do you drink coffee or don't you? Do you wear your sacred underwear or don't you? Do you pay a full tithe or don't you?
Yeah, I chimed in on Peggy's request for responses and thought of a lot of things that we report on, a lot of recent excommunications of people who say they do not believe that Joseph Smith ever practiced polygamy. And I thought, since right now the questions are all about making sure that you're in line, making sure that you believe what you're supposed to believe, I thought it might be realistic to think that at some point a question will be, do you understand and believe that our founding prophet practiced plural marriage? And you have to say yes or no, because I stand by it. In any given ward, I would guess like 25% of the people do not believe that Joseph Smith ever practiced polygamy. They're in all the wards. It's a huge and growing movement, and the church is excommunicating people at the top of this movement. I can see them asking that question just to make sure that people stay in line, party line. So I don't know. What do you think? Would they ever add that to the list of questions? It seems to be really important. They're excommunicating people right and left who say that they don't believe it.
Do you associate with or sympathize with the views of anybody who thinks that Joseph Smith, with any polygamy deniers?
Yeah, that's it.
They used to ask that, right? Do you believe, agree with, or associate with any group or individual whose practices or teachings are contrary to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
They might just need to put a little sharper point on that one.
Yeah, because people who don't believe in Joseph's polygamy consider themselves active members of the church. They don't see any problem with that, but I think the church does. So anyway, that was my thought. Something about polygamy, and what a weird world, right? The world of bizarro, where you have to, because 30 years ago you had to say, oh no, he was not. Yeah, I don't know anything. He was never a polygamist. And now you have to affirm that he was. So everything's topsy-turvy. But speaking of topsy-turvy, and do you guys have any aspirations to be in any movies? I know you, RFM, were recently did some filming in a movie that's going to be coming out. Have you ever been in a movie, Bill? An extra, anything?
I don't think so.
Huh. Well, now is your chance. And this is an actual opportunity. And I'm not even being facetious. We have a lot of never Mormons. We have active Mormons that watch. We have nuanced Mormons, post Mormons. I did go through the whole checklist and application looking at it, and it just asks you on it, are you a member? It doesn't say you're disqualified if you're not. So anyway, you can star in an LDS movie. And somebody tipped me off. They had received a link to this in their stake. The stake president has sent out a letter and said, hey, everybody, look at this opportunity. Everybody sign up if you can. This is amazing. So I clicked on the link to see what this opportunity is, because I'm always very curious. So this is called, first I thought it said Bacons. I love bacon. Beacons of Hope, right? And you have until tomorrow to apply. This is a real opportunity. So basically what it is the project is called Beacons of Hope. It's for the church temple open house. Now, this is the open house starting in April, running all through conference to conference, April to October. I had heard there was going to be some kind of a presentation or a movie that was going to be shown nonstop, kind of on Temple Square for all the visitors. I didn't know what it is, but I believe this is it. This sounds like it. So it says it's the Salt Lake Temple open house celebration. And there's a date where the volunteers need to participate. There's an application. If you go to this link, you can click on that. So what is it? The Beacons of Hope is a one-of-a-kind, immersive, large format aerial film that captures the breathtaking beauty of temples of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints around the world and explores their sacred role as beacons of hope, peace, and divine guidance through life's greatest joys and deepest trials. The film will premiere at the Legacy Theater. We all know where that is, on Temple Square, Legacy Theater, and screen throughout the Salt Lake Temple Open House before being released to audiences worldwide. So it's not only seen during the open house, it's going to go out, internationally. This is a unique opportunity to be part of an extraordinary production celebrating Temple's faith and light they bring into the lives of people everywhere. So who are they looking for to be in this film? Everyone, they say. Everyone. All ethnicities. Throughout this application, they really seem to want to show the diversity of people that belong to the church and love the temple. Adults, teens, children, age 7 and older, all minors under 16 have to have a parent. Families are welcome. We wish to represent God's children from all over the world, and attire representative of participants' cultural heritage is welcomed and requested. So they basically want people to dress, if they have a particular attire of an ethnic origin, they would like them to come and participate wearing that. So what is the activity? Walking around Temple Square with your friends and family in your attire.
That's
We
it.
will need everybody for a minimum of 4 hours to coordinate the flyover shots. And then it talks about some people staying longer, up to 8 hours. There'll be snacks, there'll be dinner. But basically the concept is they're going to do all these aerial shots and they want to show, I mean, I don't know why they just don't shoot a regular day where there's a massive crowds, but apparently they want to make sure that it's crowded. And so they're going to stack the deck and have people there in Temple Square. So when the drones fly over, there are so many people representing all these ethnicities. You have the time commitment, the date. But I thought this was interesting as it gets more into the specifics of wardrobe, nice casual attire that you might wear visiting an open house, business casual for men, Oxford polo shirts, slacks, khakis, no shorts, a tie, but you don't have to. Women, casual blouse, skirts to the knee when sitting, pants or slacks, and then shock of all shocks, it says, please no sleeveless tops. But that's incredible because you could be headed to the temple in your garments in a sleeveless top, but not for this particular film. I thought that was extremely interesting. And then, of course, they want the ethnic attire. They talked about the lava lava, the iro and boba, I can't even begin to pronounce that. That's a Mexican ethnic garment, a kimono. But again, wear a t-shirt under it if it's, it has to be modest. And this is what they want. They want you to, send in a photo and everything. Final thing says this culturally conscious clothing. They go through the different things that they want you to wear. And all you basically have to do is show up and walk around Temple Square, and they're going to film you from above, and you just got to look really excited to be there. So everybody Google that if you want to take part. I think they're filming beginning of September. But I thought that was interesting that they're bringing in, what's the word? Ringers, right? Because they don't trust that Temple Square will be full enough to have an impactful aerial shot. What do you think, RFM? And then Bill.
I think a few things. First off, I think that the reason that they're doing this with all the attire and everything is because they're going to be having a shot of the temple, and they're going to have Isaiah chapter 2 underneath the screen. And this is famous. They used to talk about this all the time when I joined the church. You remember this, don't you? And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills. And what? All nations shall flow unto it. Oh, yeah. This is going to be a fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2. So I did want to say that one thing. The other thing I wanted to say is, Bill, he may not have been in a movie, but he was on TV once for saving a kid's life, for crying out loud.
I remember that. I followed that story. No, that's a really interesting point, RFM. And I wonder, one thing that I've predicted ever since I got a hold of those leaked plans for Temple Square, which a lot of things have come true. I did a whole episode on that with Unoriginal Jim, showing everything that's come true in the last 4 years as far as those leaked plans for Temple Square. One thing that they said is it was going to be renamed Mountain of the Lord, Mount of the Lord, just like you quoted. So maybe the big reveal is going to be the renaming, and then visually all nations. I don't know. They're going to do something very impactful. I wonder.
If they do it as a theme park, they should call it the Splash Mountain of the Lord.
Okay, there it is. Perfect.
This seems so fake. And you guys are kind of hitting on this. Rebecca, you're mentioning this, that it seems intended to do two things. One is to make it look like there's a lot more people around Temple Square than there ever actually is. And two, to make it look like there's a lot more diversity and also well-dressed Mormons there than there normally is. And whatever they use this for, whether they have Isaiah 2 or not underneath it, it seems designed to portray the church as if it's thriving, as if it's busier than normal, and as if there's a lot of people from various places, but they're all temple worthy, walking around Temple Square. It seems like a dishonest game of appearances, and unfortunately coming from a church that does that in a lot of different ways.
Was there anything in here about how much these actors get paid?
Oh, this is a volunteer kind of a thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I often they will pay their actors or their missionaries doing ads, those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
yeah, not in this case. But what I thought is, okay, so beginning of September, just a few weeks after that is conference. Couldn't they
Mm.
do aerial shots at conference where it usually is packed, right? I've been on Temple
Mm.
Square during conference, but then I realized conference, you may not have the diversity, like you said, Bill, that they're after. So I don't think an aerial shot at conference, even though there might be a mass of people, is going to portray what they want, which are, diverse families all visiting Temple Square. So I don't know. I wish some of you guys would go and do this. I'm totally being sincere. Go do it. I've sent this to several friends and said, go do it and see what it's all about. And then, of course, when we all attend the open house, April to October next year, we can see the movie and see what it's all about.
I'm
be interesting.
predicting Isaiah chapter 2.
No, you know what? Now that you said that, nations of the world and Mount of the Lord, I can totally see that happening. Maybe we should bet money on it. I don't know. I bet we could. Yeah. And, somebody in the chat just said, crash it. Okay. And I wonder about that. I do wonder if they're going to lock down Temple Square during that time, because how are they going to stop somebody from, just coming to see Temple Square? And maybe they're not dressed in the way that they want to be on the video.
Well, they're going to be able to edit the video, so you'd have to crash it in a significant way and
Yeah.
sort of overwhelm all of that.
Well, no, if you're just walking around and you're wearing a black mini skirt and a black halter top and you're looking at Temple Square and you're walking, I'm sure they can edit you out, I guess is what you're trying to say. They could do that pretty easily. So yeah, interesting thing going on there. Okay, I think that's the end of our stories. I guess we should move forward. There you go, Bill. Did you guys get the note from our tour director just a few minutes ago?
Julie, yes.
Yes, Julie McCoy. You did get it?
My phone in the last few minutes. Tell me about it.
The cruise is sold out.
Okay, well, there's
There it
no
is.
reason to advertise
We're done.
anymore.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, not
Holy
only have
cow.
we didn't have a quota, we could have plenty of people, but now just with less than a month ago, the Carnival cruise is no longer taking reservations. So that's it. So we don't need to advertise anymore. We just need to, I guess, say welcome aboard to everybody that's already going. And we're just super excited. And we have so many fun surprises in store, and it's going to be awesome.
Excellent. I won't put the link in the live chat then.
No, I don't think we can. That's it. And so, yeah, but we, we're doing a follow-up survey afterwards for people that attended. We're hoping that it's going to be such a success that we might actually do it every year and try to make it better and better based on feedback. So if you didn't get a chance to go this year and you were really hoping to, we really think that this will be reoccurring, if not, every other year, something like that. So we'll see the feedback, we'll let you guys know. We'll see what happens. So, all right, let's talk about what is coming up this week. There's always something. We'll start with Mormonish. Finally, I was able to tape this episode. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited about this. Way back in June, Landon and I spent the weekend with Dr. Randy Bell in Vegas. We saw so many shows. We went out to eat. We hung out. We went to the Lone Mountain Temple site. And our idea was to experience magic and then kind of do an episode where we talked about magic and early Mormonism and, manipulation of crowds and how do people do it. We've been trying to get together to film this forever because Randy said, I will not do it unless Landon's on. And we know that Landon sometimes has a hard time with his work schedule getting on. He goes, I'm not going to do it. He goes, Landon shows up for John Lundwall. He better gosh darn well show up for me. So if you guys miss Landon, he is on this episode. It's going to be Tuesday night at 6 p.m. And it is really informative and just a lot of fun. It was a fantastic weekend. We have all kinds of pictures, and you guys are going to love this. Then on Friday, of course, we are up to episode 6. I know you're just thrilled, RFM, and you just can't wait.
I thought we'd never get to 6. I'm excited about this one more so than any of the previous 5. I've got
6 is huge. And I'm telling you, every time we do an episode, we have to add another one. This may be 25 parts. But again, lots of exciting information, commissioning our own word print study with the university back east, all kinds of stuff going on. It's way bigger than just this series. It's going to be fantastic. So this is
huge.
It's huge. Yeah, I know you're making fun of me, but I will
No,
say,
not
RFM,
at all. I'm as sincere
you
as I know how to
will
be.
eat crow if you really knew what was going on behind the scenes. Oh, you know what I can say? In the coming days. No, I'm not kidding.
Yes.
There's some stuff going on that's pretty exciting about Book of Mormon authorship and using large language model and AI and word
Mm.
print. And I think it's going to knock some people's socks off. So this particular episode, as we continue through the series, is going to be on Friday. I'm not sure exactly what time yet, but at some point.
Bill?
All right. That's what RFM?
Bill, you're always unusually quiet when Rebecca and I are going at it hammer and tongs over this series.
Because he doesn't harass me about what I put out. He's like, whatever, let her do what she wants.
Yeah, I don't think you want her giving you grief for your work. So I don't think you should give grief for hers.
Okay. Okay.
Well, no,
very good.
RFM's not the only one. I've had other people message me and give me grief, but I'm
Mhm.
telling you, there's a method to my madness. And I think someday in the coming days, people will be pretty surprised at where this all arrives at. So, all right, let's move on to what you guys have going on next week. A lot of fun stuff.
Well, for us on Wednesday night, we have country music star legend Randy Travis
We do.
coming on to sing his famous song, Digging Up Bones, because the episode is on Zelph, the White Lamanite, and we'll be digging up all the historical documents on the multitude of witnesses, and there is a multitude of them who spoke out and said, yeah, I was with the rest of Zion's camp. I experienced that. Here's what happened. And there are also folks who afterward shared what they heard those members saying about that digging up of a Native American skeleton with an arrow in his chest, claiming it was a tall Lamanite named Zelph. So we'll go into Zelph, the White Lamanite, the story, the documents, and try to derive what was actually going on there. So that'll be Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time on Mormonism Live.
But we're really going to have Randy Travis on, right?
Isn't he dead?
I don't know.
I don't know. I think he might be dead already. I think he died.
So is that a no?
That's a no. It was just me, digging up bones, digging up bones.
I don't know the song. I know the Stephen King book, Bag of Bones.
No, just, yeah. Anyway, no Randy Travis for those who believed that. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Mormonism After Dark will be Friday night, 8:00 p.m. By the way, in September, I think that what we're going to do is we're going to move this to 1 hour earlier to 6:00 p.m. And when I say that, I mean on Pacific time. Okay, it's already at 8:00 p.m. on Mountain time. We're going to move it to 7:00 p.m. Mountain time so that the people in Central, it'll start at 8:00. And the people over on the East Coast, and we have some of those, will at least be able to start at 9:00. I think that's how it works. Okay, so it'll be 6 on Pacific. Randy Travis is 67, still alive. He can make it, Bill.
I'll reach out. I'll see if I can make it happen.
Tim, call Randy. Have him come on the show, okay? So anyway, we're going to change the time. We're going to have a lot of fun, and hopefully it'll be a good time had by all. And then the following day, we're going to have a premiere of another Radio Free Mormon, and it's going to be this one. Well, let's see. There it is. Jacob Hansen caught lying about prophets again. He's finally fallen into the trap that I've set for him, that you and I have set for him, Bill, and also Colby and Travis Austin. He fell right into our clever trap by staking out the only position that was left to him, and that's the position that blows up on him like a stick of Acme dynamite.
You've got him with the old hairdo and not the new one.
I do, yes. But it's the same shock look on his face.
Is there anything else? Don't you have some things, Bill, that are, yeah, there you go.
Sunday morning, 9 a.m., the LDS Missionary Discussions number 4. This one will be on church history. This one's going to be a lot of fun. These are the LDS Missionary Discussions, if the church was honest. Sunday morning, 9 a.m. And I think that's the end of tonight's newscast, Rebecca.
Wow, I honestly can't believe it. I mean, I guess the only thing left to say is if you're watching this on Mormon Discussions, go over to Mormonish if you haven't subscribed, and subscribe over there. If you're watching it on Mormonish, go over to Mormon Discussions and subscribe. And we always have links in the show notes. If anybody would like to make a donation to support the Mormon Newscast, you guys, a lot of you already do, and you're just so fantastic. And we appreciate all of you so much. We have a lot of fun putting this together. We like all the feedback we get. We like everybody to email us and let us know what they're seeing. You know, some of our best stories come from just somebody that said, hey, I saw this, right? And it sends us down a rabbit hole. So we love that this is crowdsourced and you guys are all a part of it. You're part of the Mormon Newscast family. And we absolutely love that. So, all right. Thank you, RFM. Thank you, Bill. We will see everybody next week. There will be updates and more news, and we'll sign off for now. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.